There's a common meme that I've heard that Europe is able to make laws and America is able to make products. That's essentially the essence of it. First of all, it's a completely false narrative that I'm going to debunk, but I also want to start first at taking a look at the legitimate issues. This is typically what exploiters do is they take something that's a legitimate issue that's small and they explode it to make it the entire problem. And let's go ahead and debunk that small issue first. So if you look at universities, you look at corporate America, you look at any corporation anywhere, are there real problems with bureaucracy and just the nature of work? There are, right? There are people who don't do anything. If you look at universities, are there people who have VP positions that get paid lots of money and they add no value? Of course there are. Is it true that maybe different university teams, there could be someone that in a year does what someone who works alone could accomplish in a day? Of course, right? These are legitimate problems. But is this every single scenario in a university? Is it every single scenario in corporate America or corporate Europe? Of course not, right? And this is really how the exploiters are able to get in and distort the narrative. Also, if you look at teaching or firefighters or police officers, can we really look at them and say, well, how much money are you giving me? And it's a very false narrative to look at people who are sacrificing and doing great things for society and putting a dollar or cent accounting of them. And let's go ahead and dive into a real world example of this. There's a reality show called Alone Australia where people get dropped off into a remote location and they have to survive for, let's say, 30 to 60 days. If you look at one of the episodes, it was in Tasmania. Another one is South Island of New Zealand. And they have rules, right? And so this is regulation. If you are tracking a endangered species like an endangered eel or endangered fish or an endangered animal, you have to let it go. That's a rule, right? That's regulation. Now, why are they doing this? Why aren't people allowed to be innovators, right? And just do anything they want? Because they would destroy that part of the world. We've seen that if you have no rules, you can have poaching, right? Rhinos and elephants and tigers, right? If you let everybody do whatever they want, then there is no society. There have to be some rules. Likewise, if you look at organizations and you only are looking at things from dollars and cents perspective, it's a very faulty way to look at society. So if you go again back to, let's say, the South Island of New Zealand, and someone captures an endangered eel, well, what would a Bay Area venture capitalist do? They'd say, well, look, this eel is adding no value. We should eat this eel. This eel doesn't need to exist. We have too many rules. Let's just steal the eel, and then once we cook it, we'll be able to add some value. Well, if everybody went into a place that had endangered species and burned down the forest and took all the endangered animals, there would be nothing left. And that's really the mindset of a Bay Area VC, is to how do I destroy society and pull all of the value out of it and let other people clean it up. And that's really a problem, is that there has to be a balance, right, between the rent seeking of, somebody who's a VP that does nothing versus the rent seeking of a Bay Area VC who wants to come in and, strip mine society and drop a stick of dynamite down a cave, pull out the gold, and then let society worry about the hole they put in the ground that's full of toxic waste. There has to be a balance. And so let's go ahead and take a look at first, when people talk about the problems of bureaucracy and regulation, what do they specifically mean? In terms of a corporate structure or a university, Parkinson law is the one that people come up with quite a bit, which I would agree with, is that eventually people build these empires and then it's really unclear as to what someone is doing. And the simplest way to put this is that work contracts to fit in the time that we give it. And if you look at really what is the end result, is you have rent-seeking managers who really don't do anything, and they're collecting the rent or they're collecting high salaries while there's some other people that are doing the work. And then if you're dependent on that team, you also have problems because they're going to take 100 times or 200 times longer than it would take for you to just do the work yourself. I think the the key takeaway or the key metric to look at that kind of behavior is that it takes one day to do something that a organization that has problems would take a year to do. And I've personally seen this many times. Likewise, if you look at corporations, there's a lot of politics where there's a manager, a middle manager, and an upper manager, and a manager that reports to a manager, and all they're doing is playing politics and sabotaging each other, and nothing is actually getting done. That's also very common as well. So those are legitimate problems, but is the solution to just let there be no rules? And if we look at some of the stuff that's happened in the last 40 years in America, there's been less and less regulation, less and less rules. And I think if you look at America, like let's say the South Island of New Zealand or Tasmania, which has all of these laws around protection so that people don't destroy those beautiful climates, you can see that America basically was left to be destroyed because the exploiters came in and extracted all of the value. So if you look at things like teaching, or you look at people who are doing the actual work, if you have no union protection, then you can just extract all the value and leave other people to deal with the consequences. If you look at teaching, for example, it's a little bit like the eel. How do you measure the value of someone who's choosing to do things where they're helping other people, they're sacrificing the upper income level that they could get if they had a different kind of a job? It's a little bit like saying to the eel, hey, I don't care if you're an endangered species, how much money are you making me? I'm going to destroy you and cook you in a pan because, well, you need to give me some money. That is such a nihilistic and simplistic way to look at society. Likewise, if you go to teachers or universities, or you look at the people who are doing things that are helping society, and you only put it into a structure of, hey, how much money are you making for me? Well, what kind of world are you going to live in? You're going to live in a world that's been strip mined, and there's nothing left except for extremely rich people, and then everyone else who has to suffer the consequences. So there is a middle ground here. There's a middle ground between, essentially bureaucracy that's unchecked, and people are rent seeking in the small, and then essentially no rules where the ultra wealthy rent seek in the large. And that's where Europe really could learn from some of the mistakes that America has made for the last 40 years. And so how would we look at the ways to measure progress and the ways to look at success? So I've taught data science for the last 10 years, UC Berkeley, Duke, Northwestern, UC Davis. And so I have a pretty good perspective of thinking of things both from a systems level, so thinking of things in a computer system, but also thinking of things from a data science perspective. We need to look at the system. So what is the system that we could look at? Well, life expectancy in a nation is a pretty good metric. If we look at the life expectancy in America, it's below even Cuba. So what's going on? There's a real problem, right? The system is a problem. It's almost like there's endangered species, and there's lack of plant life, and the ecosystem or the island there's something wrong. There's something wrong because it's been exploited. If you look at a place where it's healthy, right, there's a healthy balance of animals. Animals are not endangered. The water is clean. The air is clean. It's like it was, 1,000 years ago. So if you look at Europe and we look at what are they doing well, life expectancy is doing very well. You look at places like Spain, people live essentially as long as any other country in the world. It's one of the top countries in the world for life expectancy for a female. I think last time I checked, it's around maybe 88. That's what I would consider as a good metric, is how long do people live. Also, if you look at the causes of bankruptcy in the United States, the number one cause of bankruptcy in the United States is healthcare. So imagine how terrible that is for people who are poor, middle class. They spend their whole life working for people who are extremely wealthy, and at the very end, all of the value gets pulled out, and it puts into this inefficient healthcare system. We have examples of people in other countries. The majority of other countries in the world that are modern countries have some kind of socialized healthcare system that doesn't exist in the United States. So that's number two problem of the United States. If we also look at the number one cause of death of children, I mean, if a society cannot protect its children, what is wrong with the society? Well, what is the number one cause of death for children in America? It's guns. So why is it that we can't do anything about that? Well, there's a systemic problem in America with lack of regulation. So that's a third example. And then also, if you look at the income inequality in America since 1980 until 2025, you can see that it's actually approaching the greatest income inequality in the history of the world in America. So why are we letting that become on track to getting to exponential levels? And what are the consequences of that? Well, one of the consequences of letting unchecked behavior like this or unregulated behavior happen is that extreme wealth allows people to buy elections. We saw that with Elon Musk. He donated hundreds of millions of dollars. We see American corporations donating millions and millions of dollars to the government of the United States. If you have monopoly power of Apple, Google, Meta, etc., these trillion-dollar companies, and you let them put unlimited money into the government, that extreme wealth and monopoly power is extracting all of the value out of a system, squeezing it, just like killing all the endangered animals, poisoning the water, strip mining the forest. The result is then you have a system that's broken. The organs are failing. The total environment is failing. And I think that's really the example when people in Europe are looking at what's happening in America. You're looking at a false narrative, which is that, yes, because America for the last 40 years has squeezed the island of America, right? If we think of it as an island that has all these beautiful natural resources, you can temporarily get extra value if you tear down all the trees, you kill all the endangered animals, you poison all the water. Temporarily, it looks like you're succeeding because you're cheating. If you look at things like the Y Combinator ecosystem, illegal hotels, illegal taxis, these illegal hotels have caused global homelessness. Also, it's caused the prices to go up. They're often more expensive. There's safety issues. So by only looking at the number of the revenue that's generated, you're missing the big picture. Just like if someone went into the water and they took an endangered animal and said, oh, well, you should just be revenue for me. Like, I don't care if you're endangered. Like, what are you doing for me? Likewise, if you look at America only by the dollars and cents perspective or GDP, you're missing the fact that society has been strip mined. So what is the end result, and how could Europe counter that narrative is to say, of course we should be more efficient. Of course we should build more products, but also let's not do what America did. So how could we have sensible regulation? So I'll give some recommendations. One of them is that keep doing the things that you're doing that are great. People live long. They have great health care. In general, there's great public transportation. These are amazing attributes that America does not have. Likewise, Europe could also think about ways to encourage very small teams. So encourage these structures where you could give grants to individuals or give grants to 3 or 5 person teams and intentionally keep very small teams and intentionally increase competition. So you could think of any kind of a global company that's $1 trillion company is the anti-pattern. Just like going into the South Island of New Zealand and taking all of the endangered species out and cooking them up in a pot and putting them into a pan or something. That's not that would be like thinking of the GDP as the only value. Yes, if you just completely gut and destroy some natural resource, can you get temporarily good results? You can. But if you look at things in a sustainable way, that's the better approach. So thought I would give my thoughts on someone who has spent a lot of time building companies, building revenue, working in university systems, working in corporations, working in barrier capital ecosystems, and I've been very successful at that. But I also see that there are huge problems and that Europe does not want to copy what America did. You should treat it as a cautionary tale and lean into the stuff that you've done well.